March 2023, meeting of Community Board 3's Transportation and etc. Committee. It's actually partly sort of a joint committee meeting with the Parks. So we'll be letting Parks people in, because when we have in any case, hello Parks people as well. And let's start with a attendance that is just the transportation folks.
David Crane.
Here.
Solomon Bletcher.
Here.
Vincent Sarita.
Here.
Sean Garcia. Nancy Kong, President. Michelle Coopersmith, President. Lee Berman.
Here.
Jamie Rosario.
Good. There's only two items of business, and the first one is this, Chinatown Connections. And so we're going to hear a presentation. This is launching an effort that's going to take a long time. So most of the public already knows what this is. Was it not being recorded earlier?
Was not.
Okay, well, just for the record, then, this is the 2024 March meeting of the CB3 Transportation Committee. We're going to be hearing about this Chinatown Connections project. My committee doesn't know that much about it. I don't know if probably the CB3 Parks Committee doesn't either. All the rest of you do. I'm going to outline it really quick before I turn it over to the agencies. A couple of us were there for CB3 last night at a meeting of the Chinatown Connections working group. That's going to be run sort of in parallel for a while. I think I counted 19 community stakeholder organizations, including CB3, 5 agencies, and 5 elected offices represented there. I keep turning this off. Okay. All right. It's going to be a year or two of occasional presentations to CB3 and that working group in parallel to come up with what is the scope and what actually can be implemented for these parts of this Chinatown Connections project. And then there'll be construction going for a couple of years, few years. I think that we're going to hear more accurately, but I believe that they are hoping to have construction done in 2029, it's 2024 right now. So if you've been on the board a really long time, it's similar to proposals that were going through 2008 and then more recently in the arts boom. But we're going to hear about 3 parts. There's a gateway project, which is going to be a large work of public art. Now they'll go through one process. There's going to be 2 things that are very related. They're calling it beautification of Park Row. That's connecting basically the Park Row between Chatham Square and the Brooklyn Bridge, I suppose, or City Hall Park or something, making that prettier, more accessible, etc. And then the third part is they're calling it Kimlau Square, but Kimlau Square, people should know, is part of Chatham Square. It's a little state park, I believe, that has a couple monuments on it right now. And all those 3 things are going to have to come together. The scope is not entirely clear to me after the little presentation I saw last night. And I actually think that it is going to evolve. So, you know what we're looking at? We're not looking at anything tonight that we're going to take any position on. We're learning about it, and we're going to hear about it repeatedly over the next year. So agencies, EDC, I'm just going to let you do all of the presentation, including your introductions of people. I believe EDC is probably the lead agency. I know it's going to obviously include DOT, most likely parks, etc. Who wants to come grab the mic? Gigi Lee. People probably remember her.
Good evening, friends and neighbors. I think that's appropriate. My name's Gigi Lee. I am a vice president in EDC's Government and Community Relations team, and I am one of the project leads for Chinatown Connections. And the project team here is very excited to be here today to introduce you to Chinatown Connections. Our plan is to give you an overview of all.
Go to the other side.
Go to the other side.
A really bad sideline.
That's fine. Oh. Go ahead.
Go to the other side.
the presentation today will give you an overview, a brief history of how we got here today, an overview of the project, and also some of the next steps and how you can get involved. I want to also acknowledge that we've been joined by the Manhattan Borough Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, Ed Pinkar. And I will start off the presentation, and then I'll pass it over to Casey from DOT, and then Haya, who's also on the project team for EDC. So with that, if we could advance to the next slide. I will try to speak closer to the microphone. Is that better?
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay. Great, so this is the agenda for tonight. Next slide. So on February 9th, the mayor was joined by the Secretary of State, the DOT Commissioner, as well as all of the overlapping elected officials for Lower Manhattan to officially announce the Chinatown Connections plan. And if we go to the next slide, the goals for Chinatown Connections is really rooted in how we can stimulate some economic growth, bolster identity and culture, as well as looking at expanding our public realm and pedestrian space. And I think something that, as we started our outreach, we can all agree on is that the current configuration of Kimlau Square with these 7 or 8 roads that lead in and around it, as well as the very long crosswalks and very confusing paths for bikers, pedestrians, and vehicles alike can really use improvement. And so that is also one of the key factors that we will be trying to address as part of this project. So let me give you a little bit of background on kind of how we got here. I think those of you who live in the community and many of you who live on Park Row know that Park Row used to be open to public vehicles. It stopped being accessible by public vehicles after 9/11. And since then, the city has made multiple efforts to improve both circulation into Park Row from a vehicular, bicyclist, and just in general in terms of circulation. But what happened 2 years ago is that the governor made a $20 million investment through a program called the DRI, which stands for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. Every year, the governor invests $10 million in a selected neighborhood, and they pick projects to invest in that stimulate economy in that particular neighborhood. So they had picked Chinatown the year right before COVID started, and then because of COVID, they didn't make an award that year. And what they decided to do was to take the $10 million from the year before and the $10 million from the year after and combine them together. So Chinatown got a $20 million investment from the state. It's a one-time investment, and there was an entire selection process, and 11 projects are splitting that $20 million. And 3 projects in particular, which added up to 11.5 million, are being combined to form the state portion of this investment.
Is it possible you stand here where I was, because you're not being picked up for the online, and we've got at least as many people out there as in here? I think it'll fix that problem. I'm so
Want
sorry.
me to stand or sit?
If you just stand there, everyone can see better. I think this will help them.
I mean, don't show up at 6:30 for a 6:30 meeting,
So in addition to the 11.5 million, because that only really kickstarted a portion of the project, the city later decided that we would throw in an additional 45 million to make this close to a $55–56 million project. And we'll get into those projects in a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Next slide.
Okay, so going back to some of the efforts to improve these intersections, even before this significant investment, DOT had worked on getting feedback from the community. Many of you may remember they had kiosks and DOT staff out in Kimlau Square in person and with iPads asking how do you use the space, what improvements you'd like to see, and that started an engagement process of collecting very local community feedback to help guide this larger process. And there was also in-person as well as Zoom workshops that were conducted in the summer. And so you can see here sort of the neighborhood context and strategy that we are thinking about, just what the existing circulation patterns are for pedestrians and bikers, some of the ideas around proposed circulation, and then again, really rooted in a renewed linkage, hence the name Chinatown Connections, on how we can really connect the different parts of Lower Manhattan into Chinatown from Financial District, from the Brooklyn Bridge and the stairwell, which we'll also get into a little bit more specifics. And then for those of you who don't have to brave the crossing every day, I just want to orient you for this discussion of sort of what we're looking at when we are talking about Kimlau Square today, right? So the long crossings are the crossings in red. We have the War Memorial from the American Legion, as well as the Linju statue. And then also something that became very apparent in our outreach is that because of the inconsistent non-contiguous bike lanes, the bikers kind of cut through the square a lot, which also is not particularly safe. So that's something we've been looking at. And then also some of the constrained pedestrian space elements, the public space elements that are just because of the size of the public square. So next slide. So what do we want to do about this? So going back to the 3 projects that were awarded before, the 3 projects that that were awarded from the state was $5 million for renovating Kimlau Square. So the square will get larger, and that is, we envision more community events, just more open space to kind of draw visitors into the neighborhood, a place where people can rest and sort of mingle, and also kind of like as you're coming into Chinatown, coming through Park Row, that might be just kind of like the first place that you land and kind of figuring out and orienting yourself to Chinatown. And then there's $4 million to beautify Park Row Connections, which DOT will talk about in a little bit. And then $2.5 million to create a Chinatown Welcome gateway. That is the part that I think we will have to do a lot more community engagement. Haya will talk about that component in a little bit. And we will also be doing a parallel engagement process for that. So I think that is the overview, and we're going to start now with DOT to talk about some of the steps that they are taking to kick off the engagement process.
And I'm going to actually ask that we've been good so far, but let's hold comments or questions until the very end, because it will just derail it a little. Well, it will derail it if we don't. Thank you.
Thanks, Gigi. So my name is Casey Brown, I'm from DOT, and I'm one of the project leads for this project. So just kicking off about talking about the overall project. Sorry about that. So we're looking at conducting a large-scale traffic study as part of this project to really identify vehicular circulation. And we're pairing that with a study that will also identify the possibility of reopening Park Row and its impacts on the surrounding street grid. We want to really understand what reopening the street after 20 years of closure would do to both the intersection at Chatham Square and on the southern end of the corridor. So this map shows all the locations. We'll be doing an in-depth traffic study. We'll be conducting vehicular, bicyclist, pedestrian counts. We'll also be conducting travel time runs, so we can track travel speeds along all the corridors. We'll be looking at parking and loading operations within the area to see how we can both improve and accommodate changing economic needs. And we'll also be looking at a very high-level change in traffic patterns for Lower Manhattan. We'll be looking at origin-destination data for anyone who would be potentially using Park Row or doesn't go through this corridor today to see if there's any negative or positive impacts from those people who are traveling in the city. And we'll be looking at this under 3 scenarios. So we'll be looking at this from just a simple, just the Kimlau Square improvements on their own. We'll then also be looking at if you just reopen Park Row on its own, and then also looking at if you combine these 2 initiatives, how those interact together to make sure we're not creating any negative impacts for the project. So it's a very comprehensive project that we'll be doing over the next 9 months. We'll be coming back to the board and the working group to share the results of those studies as they come in stages. Next slide. So at a very high level, we do have kind of an existing and proposed plan. This is a very conceptual plan to use to start the process. There's a lot of changes that may be made that come out of the traffic study, community engagement, operational challenges, also utility conflicts are a big concern for this project due to its location in Lower Manhattan. So this is the starting point of where we start this project. Some of the big moves are to really increase the size of Kimlau Square by shifting it to the other side of Bowery against the west side of the square. That creates an aligned intersection with Bowery and St. James, so accommodating traffic who's going north and south without having to make a lot of redundant turns. We're also looking at improving bike connections to reduce conflicts between bicyclists and pedestrians, and also really looking to shorten pedestrian crossings to make it much easier to navigate this square and really connect people to the surrounding businesses, but also onto Park Row itself to connect down into Lower Manhattan. Next slide. In addition to the larger Kimlau Chatham Square project, we're also looking at beautifying Park Row. We're looking at doing this in 2 stages. The first would be an in-house DOT expense-funded street improvement project, what we call SIP. That would look to use a lot of our in-house toolkits to do a quick project this year, which would look to improve the security infrastructure, to make it a more welcoming environment, look to use art as a way to encourage people to use Park Row. Right now it doesn't feel very welcoming, it doesn't really feel like you belong there as a pedestrian. So looking to really increase wayfinding to draw people up from Lower Manhattan and from the bridge into Chinatown. We'll be coordinating with NYPD and other agencies to accomplish this in-house project. And we'll be coming back to the board in May with a formal proposal and doing some in-person outreach in April to collect some feedback on some of the initial ideas. So more to come on that later in the near term, and then looking for an implementation of the in-house project in late summer, early fall. Next slide. And I want you to turn it over to Haya.
Hi everyone, I'm Haya Rizvi from the New York City Economic Development Corporation's planning team. The third component of this project is creating a Chinatown Welcome gateway. Of course, that's something that this community's talked about for a long time. And what we're thinking right now is, to create some form of public art that acts as a gateway that kind of celebrates Chinatown's culture and history, and kind of complements the expanded public space here. We've kind of shown an example of where that gateway could be located, but that the location and the form of public art is all still up for discussion, and we'll be working closely with our community working group as well as community boards and other public engagement that we'll outline in a few slides. to kind of understand what the best location will be, as well as kind of the form of that public art. This component of the project will also be going through the DCLA Present for Art process, so there will be a broader artist selection process for this piece. Next slide. In terms of project roles and responsibilities, I guess you guys already have an idea that EDC is the lead agency for this project, but it is quite a large project and an interagency effort. So in no particular order, we've listed our partner agencies here. New York City Cultural Affairs will be helping us with the gateway component of this project, and particularly that artist selection process to make sure it's kind of open and responsive to the community. DOT just went over the part of the project that they're most kind of keenly involved with. And then the New York City Parks Department will also be supporting the work on the plaza, as well as the current Memorial Arch renovation that's ongoing, right, or that is in procurement right now. Our executive agency, as mentioned earlier by Gigi, through the DRI, is the Department of State, since they've contributed a grant award to each of these components. We'll also be bringing on board a consultant team to help us with engagement, planning, and design. And that'll be a multidisciplinary team of consultants that can kind of be experts on these components, and they'll be retained through EDC and will lead that work as well. Next slide. Yeah, so we'll be meeting most frequently with the Chinatown Connections working group. We kicked off that meeting last night. A number of people in this room were at that meeting. So we've kind of created a group of around 20 or 21 community stakeholders, kind of went through a long process with stakeholders as well as elected officials to make sure that this list was pretty representative of those who would be concerned with this project. CP3 is a member of that as well as our local elected offices. So the council member, the borough president, as well as the assembly member, state senator, and congress member. Next slide. So our engagement process will kind of underpin the planning for all three of these components. Over the next 18 months, we'll be undertaking quite an extensive engagement process. And we'll start engaging immediately on the Park Row SIP, as well as the potential Park Row Capital project that DRI has outlined, as well as the Gateway project. So those will kind of start next month. We'll be retaining an engagement consultant that helps us just kind of go full steam ahead on that, start talking to the community working group about each of those components. And then over the summer, we'll probably kick off with a public engagement event that's kind of open to the public, likely in May or June. And we'll continue to attend these community board meetings throughout, as well as go through an artist selection process that'll include some community input led by DCLA, and then kind of supplement that with targeted stakeholder discussions as kind of advised by the community working group. So things like working with SDS to make sure we do small business outreach, which will be important stakeholders along this corridor. In terms of language accessibility, we've heard repeatedly that it's very important that all materials for these meetings, as well as for each of the larger kind of public engagement events, are available in Mandarin and Cantonese at a minimum. We're going to be working with the community working group to make sure that we understand if there's any additional kind of language needs needed. So after completion of the design, which will take place over the next 18 months, our construction manager will continue to kind of communicate and engage the local community and community boards as they do on any project that we undertake. Going to the next slide. So then looking kind of more closely at each component of our project schedule here. Just to kind of outline, we've outlined the next 3 years. As Gigi mentioned earlier, we're anticipating construction completion sometime in 2029. 5 years out from now, but the next 3 years we've kind of mapped out more closely. Along the edge of the screen, the left side of the screen, you can see kind of the 3 project components as well as kind of the full project at the bottom. So we're kind of trying to illustrate how these pieces are going to be moving kind of in parallel and then together later in the process. So most immediately, we'll be kicking off SIP implementation over the summer, as Casey mentioned, as well as the traffic study in the spring. And that'll kind of lead us into our design consultant being procured by the fall, which will lead to schematic design development for both Park Row as well as the Kimlau Square and the intersection redesign.
At the same time, we're going to be working with the community working group as well as public stakeholders to develop a design brief for the Gateway project. And we hope that by the end of the summer, that's kind of finalized and in place and captures the community's feedback so that we can kind of pass that off to the artist selection process. And that kind of public design brief will be a document that our community working group has a lot of input on. It'll capture public engagement that's done additionally as well. And it'll kind of inform the artist selection process. It'll probably be appended to an RFP that goes out and kind of reflects the community's priorities and values for the project. Then both of those projects will kind of move to detailed design development together in mid-2025. So that design team that's brought on board in the fall will continue to work on all three components together, which will lead to construction in 2026, and then anticipated completion of construction in 2029. Throughout that process, as mentioned earlier, we'll be undertaking various forms of engagement. We've kind of plotted out 4 key milestones here with stars that will be kind of open, larger public engagement events. And then there will likely be many more opportunities for targeted outreach, smaller stakeholder discussions, as well as, maybe a survey online and other things as kind of guided by our community working group. And moving on to next steps, nearby projects, sorry about that. So our project team is kind of aware that there's a lot of construction that's kind of upcoming in the next few years in this area. We want to make sure that we're kind of doing a coordinated approach, both in terms of stakeholder engagement as well as construction impact mitigation. So making sure that people don't feel fatigued over, this set of projects that we're aware of in the community. So, particularly thinking of some of the larger construction projects like Manhattan Borough-based Jail or 70 Mulberry reconstruction, we want to kind of make sure that our construction timelines aren't kind of overwhelming the community. So that's just kind of our accounting of nearby projects, as well as just identifying a few completed and future clauses that DOT is working on. So just wrapping up with some next steps for our project. The first one, we're here today at CB3. We'll be presenting the CB1 next week, I believe. We're working on procuring an engagement consultant, so that consultant will be brought on board by next month. We're currently kind of deep within the process of reviewing proposals and selecting a team for that. And then we're going to be kicking off a Gateway subgroup. So conversations with community working group members really just focus on that Gateway project in a more focused way. And we're going to be continuing to engage the NYP on their kind of existing footprint in Park Row, since we heard repeatedly from the community as well as the community working group that that's a priority and kind of something that will define the future of Park Row. Over the summer, we expect that DOT will report back on some of their findings from the traffic study. We're planning to hold a first public engagement event. And then SIP implementation will also commence, and we'll likely report back on what that looks like and what to expect there in more detail, closer to. And then we'll be releasing an RFP for planning and design consultant team, which will kind of be brought on board by the fall and kind of carry through the process until construction. That's it from us.
So I'm going to open it up for questions from from committee members, and I'll try to do the parks as well. Actually, how do we do this? We're going to be admitting people who say they are parks members to the meeting, so they'll be able to speak. In the meantime, transportation and I guess parks people in the room. Do you have questions of the agencies? I think we should, at least for now, keep these questions not too detailed, because this is the launch of a process, okay? So they don't know exactly what's going to be in it or whether a thing is going to happen or not. And if we go to that level of detail, we could just go down a rabbit hole, and I'd rather us not do it, at least as a committee. But are there questions? Any third? Yes, Michelle? Yeah. If you stay here, they can hear you, because it's 2 mics.
Thanks, guys, for coming tonight. Can you describe a little bit more about what the in-person outreach that you'll be doing ahead of the same.
Just to repeat the question was what type of in-person outreach are we doing in advance of the street improvement project? So we plan on doing in-person workshops with our street investor team and some of our DOT staff in person on Park Row in April. We're still finalizing the exact dates, but we can notify the board and we can send out notification via all of the city agency socials. So that will include potentially a survey, going over some of the proposals to get feedback, talk about issues, and start to really formulate, finalize the in-house project, as well as help formulate and create scope for our future capital project on Park Row.
Thank you. You mentioned that you'd be working with NYPD around the security situation, but the checkpoints. But are NYPD and SDNY two of the stakeholders that will be part of this, because it seems like they're important ones? My understanding is that NYPD closed Park Row for a reason to private cars, so I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Yes, so as part of this project, one of the goals of this in-house project is to improve pedestrian experience, and pedestrian experience is hindered by vehicles parked on the sidewalk. So we are partnering with our other agencies and with NYPD to rationalize what's happening on Park Row to really achieve the goals of the project, which is to beautify Park Row and make it inviting for pedestrians. So that is one of the main goals, and we will be coordinating with NYPD.
Oh, I mean, like the security standpoint, SCNY and NYPD. For like the long-term project.
For the long term, for more like a reopening, is that what you're?
Yeah.
So that is more, would follow the traffic study that we're doing. So we will continue to have conversations about Park Row once we have the results of the traffic study, and we have real conversations with community stakeholders, residents, and people in the community about the future of Park Row.
Thanks, Nancy. Did you want to do it? I'm going to do this. I'm going to check if anyone's complaining about tech, but if you do it here, I won't need to repeat the question. Right here. This mic and that mic, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the update from everybody.
Closer to your mouth.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions, and once for the nearby projects, if you could also include, you talked about it, I know you may not have had a chance to update. Pace University is doing renovation. The district attorney's office is doing a renovation. They have clearly told us that the staging area is going to be on Park Row. And then the Federal Detention Center, I'm assuming at some point will also get a renovation. So there's actually a lot of things happening right now. The pinch point, I think you all know, is a huge issue. So I'm glad I know you all are working to address that. So there's just two more things. One is my question related for the traffic study. How or can you include, for example, the Brooklyn Bridge ramp? That used to be open, but it was closed after 9/11. And if that would ever be reopened, or how would you include that in your traffic study? And then just my second is really to please just confirm for the public here in terms of the bus routes through Park Row, and then now with any renovation with Kimlau, that the bus routes would continue, because our residents really depend on that route, and it's really important for them to know and be confident that it will remain as it is. Thank you.
Yes, we can definitely add those other projects to our project map for context. Those are good points. For the Brooklyn Bridge ramp, we can continue to have conversations with both NYPD and our bridges unit to discuss that. It's not clear at this time where the city falls on that subject. And then in regards to bus routes, as part of the Kimlau Square project, we don't envision any changes to bus routes. All the bus routes would be maintained, all the stops would be maintained. Stops may shift to one side of the intersection or so, just depending on how the design comes out, but we don't anticipate any changes to bus route operations. There may, of course, be impacts during construction, and that will coordinate with the MTA on where temporary bus stops go during any construction activity.
Okay, I am not seeing hands from the online board members. So I'm going to open it up to, with nobody else in the, other board members in here in a second. Nobody else? No more? Are you the one?
Sorry.
Just so we all understand, I think that the funding slide was maybe a little confusing. How much city money is committed to each one of the 3 projects? / do you know? Thanks.
So we're not thinking about it as a separate project sort of situation. But I will say, if we look at the funding slide, the state committed very concrete amounts. The city's additional 44.3 is really focused primarily on the Kimlau Square redesign, and that is DOT capital money, so it is really to cover the cost of that component.
Okay, so I'm going to let Trevor and go, and then other board members. Trevor, you want to, you staying here, they were saying. I don't think if they stand over here that they get picked up on the, I know. Except for in the room. Is that better, Mike? Go ahead.
So my question is more general. I know that you're,
What if we turn that around? So that people can
That
see?
other mic
Well,
is better.
this is the mic. This other mic is better for the room. This is better for the room, but this is the mic for the online. So I don't know how to turn this off, but
so my question goes to the actual state. Right now, that area is a mess of traffic, and I noticed from the proposed drawing that you're shrinking those lanes. Are you anticipating less traffic because of congested pricing? And also, I'm just curious as to what your scope is and what you're going to study. You're studying today's traffic, or are you in anticipation of less traffic from congested pricing?
Great question. At this time, we are planning on studying existing conditions to start. So we'll be collecting traffic data over the next couple of months. We then will have an opportunity to observe any impacts from congestion pricing to make any necessary updates. But we're starting from like a worst case scenario that no traffic levels change, and then we can continue to adapt the design in the study in response to what we see come out of congestion pricing, because there's still a lot of questions. We don't want to like wait till right after congestion pricing goes in to collect data, because there might be a immediate fall off of traffic and then a resurgence. It's a big change in the city, and we don't want to do something too soon before we know the full impacts. But we are able to accommodate congestion pricing in the future for the design. There will be time for that. In regards to the number of lanes, there are some slight tweaks to the lane assignments, but we do foresee that the simplification of operations, so instead of having to make 2 turns, you now just go through. Okay, sorry. We'll be able to actually improve operations because it'll be more straight, like more streamlined. So we actually do feel like simplifying operations will improve traffic, and you won't need as many lanes because there's not as many people turning or waiting for pedestrians to cross. It creates a more standard intersection. But the traffic study will be confirming all of that, so there may be changes from what's shown to accommodate operations.
David, just a quick follow-up. Does your study include opening Park Row and not opening Park Row? Is that part of the scope?
Yes, so the question was, does the traffic study include opening Park Row or not reopening? We are including opening Park Row, so we'll be studying opening Park Row, the Kimlau Square improvements as shown in the presentation, and then a combination of both of those.
Yeah, if you're, sorry.
yeah, if you would, that would.
If you're studying opening Park Row, are you also studying potential impacts if there is traffic there that would be caused on the bus routes that go through Park Row or other vehicles that currently use it?
Yeah, great question. The traffic study will be looking at that, and that's part of the conversation to come back to the community to determine the fate of Park Row. We really want it to be an open process, so we want to study what would happen, and then come to the community to reach consensus over what to do with it. because we do know the community is split. That was from some of our on-site outreach. Some people don't want it open, some people want it open. So we just want to know all the impacts to all roadway users before we make a decision, and we have community consensus.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Carol.
All right, I have a question for the DLT. On the sidewalk along Park Road, is there plans to expand the sidewalks? Or are you using existing sidewalk space? Also, on the west side of Park Road, the sidewalk itself is a little in disrepair. Are there plans to fix that? And one more question is the expansion of Barry along Chatham Square. Is that going to be a raised curb expansion, or is that going to be a painted border?
Good questions. For Park Row, for the in-house project, we are looking to increase pedestrian space on the southeast side of Park Row. The pinch point is something that came up as very important to the community as an issue to fix, so we are focusing a lot of efforts on mitigating that issue, and we'll have more information when we come back to the board in May with the design for that. The west side of Park Row is not currently included in the in-house project for repair, but we could include it in a future capital project. The current capital project has $4 million. That's a rather small amount of funding that we receive from the state for a large capital reconstruction, so we would have to seek additional money to do a larger reconstruction of Park Row.
The expansion of
Yes.
Chatham Square.
The expansion of Chatham Square. So what we're looking at for Chatham Square, for Kimlau Square, is a full capital reconstruction. So this would be a full-on reconstruction, raised sidewalks, plantings, a full capital project. So no paint, no temporary materials. This would be a permanent plaza in final form.
Okay, okay, and then I'm gonna try to figure out how to do the online ones, Susan. I think the online ones, I'm going to try to have one of these computers speak into the room, and then have them repeat the question. But this is Susan, she's here.
Okay, thank you. Still have my Park Row T-shirt from 2002. At the time that Park Row was closed, we were told it was completely about Homeland Security. So are all the Homeland Security issues completely gone?
That's a great question. I think that's something we'll have to continue to have conversations with as part of this process with our partners at NYPD and the state level. So I don't think it's necessarily determined at this time. There was acceptance from NYPD to potentially reopen Park Row, so there is some give and take to that. But as part of this larger traffic study, we will be having all those conversations to really determine is Park Row safe to reopen, both from an operational standpoint and from a homeland security standpoint. How long is it open? How is it open? All those questions will come out of this process.
Okay, now I'm going to unmute my box and ask Ann to say hello and make sure we don't cause horrible feedback. Where's the button? All right, Dan, say something.
Hello.
Oh, that's working. So I'm going to ask them to repeat it. Well, I'm afraid to stick the mic too close to that. Say hello again.
Okay, hello.
Go ahead.
My question is, I keep hearing open Park Road. Does that mean open to private vehicles? Is that what you're discussing? Because that would definitely have an impact on the pedestrian experience as well as mass transit and bicycles. So is it, when you say open, you're talking mostly about private vehicles, is that correct?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question for anyone who didn't hear. So the question was, when we talk about reopening Park Row, is that mostly focused on private vehicles, or is that also including impacts on pedestrians and mass transit users? So as stated earlier, there's a similar question that came up for that. So we are looking at the vehicular impacts of opening Park Row. That's the main focus of the traffic study. But we will be looking at what the knock-on effects are for how that impacts bus riders, pedestrians, cyclists, and be able to come and present those findings to the community to have an actual honest conversation about what reopening does mean. Maybe it is maintaining just pedestrian access and cyclist access, maybe it is opening it to private vehicles. So that's what the purpose of this process will be.
Are there other committee members, board members who are wanting to ask questions? I'm going to move on to board member.
Diane.
Diane Lake is. Okay, I'm going to get Diane from online.
But you want to tell them all the chance?
Hi, can you hear
You'll have a
me?
chance in a minute. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask about your plans for community engagement. I see that you're planning to hire an engagement consultant and start community engagement as soon as this summer. And my question is, are you relying on the consultants to guide you through the community engagement process? Have you talked to other agencies who have done big changes for the community, since we have a lot of those going on right now? And will your plans for community engagement and your approach to that come back to the board, the community, for more discussion?
Hi, yeah, that's a great question. To answer the first part of your question on whether they'll be leading and kind of like advising on engagement, I think specifically on this project, we're lucky enough that we have people like Gigi who are very familiar with the community and have a lot of experience working with a lot of the stakeholders here. So I think that it'll kind of be a give and take of, how we'll be able to advise them on some things that they might not have experience with. It does depend on who that consultant team is, and in the RFP, we've definitely emphasized that we're looking for someone who understands the community and has the cultural background to kind of reflect the community a bit better. So we're optimistic that we'll find someone who also understands the community. In terms of working with other agencies, I mean, we work very closely with our our interagency team, which includes DOT and Parks and DCLA, who all have experience working on projects locally. And we're trying to kind of understand what their experiences are in the team or in the community, and sort of start learning from those as well as we're kicking it off.
I would just add, in addition to what Aya said, in our engagement slide, we talked about the sort of multifaceted engagement that we're doing. So in addition to coming to community boards with regular updates, as well as having the community working group, we will also be doing smaller focused engagement. For example, we anticipate a group of conversations just with small business owners, right? DOT has engaged conversations with local groups that do art and artist work to have discussions about what the SIP art components will be. So there will be both very high level as well as very detailed engagement. I would add that this public realm project is a very high priority for the city. It is being watched over and managed directly from a very senior level staffer at the Deputy Mayor of Operations office. So you will see us often, and you will have a lot of access to the project team as well as the consultants, particularly in this first sort of 16 to 18 month engagement process.
Thank you. If you could mute yourselves, the ones who are online, and drop your hands. So I'm going to go to people in the room who do have similar questions still, and I'll try to intersperse them online. Rainey, are you going to be able to tell me when it looks like you've got hands from other people? Okay, so just interrupt between. So the best way to do this, I think, is just let you ask it from the seat, and I'm going to ask whoever you're interrogating to just repeat half of the question so that people online know the context. So I'm just going to scan the room from one side to the other.
I have just a question about the SIP process, which is the standard SIP playbook. Does that include removing barriers? We have a lot of concrete and metal barriers on Park Row, and one of the easiest and best things that could be done would just be to get rid of them all. And is that something that you do?
Good question. The question was, as part of the SIP, do we envision removing a lot of the barriers along Park Road. That is a main component of the project, is working with NYPD to do a kind of complete sweep barrier cleanup. You have bollards, why do you need granite blocks? There's a lot of like extra stuff out there, so we do look at wanting to look at really what's necessary, how can it be arranged in a cohesive way to be inviting and to eliminate whatever's not necessary, because there seems to be a lot of storage out there.
Go ahead.
With the design brief, can you clarify, are there 3 design briefs? Is there one for Kimlau Square, one for the Gateway, and one for Park Row? What are you looking for? If one project is only $4 million for the design of Park Row, which seems, as you pointed out, rather unlikely or utopian for any major change, how is this going to work out? And is there one request for proposal? In other words, is there one team that you're looking for all the projects, or 3 different teams?
Okay, I'll try to remember each piece of that question. The question was about what the content of the design brief is, as well as if there's multiple RFPs. And was there anything else that I was Okay. So the design brief will focus on the Arch project, or the Gateway project itself. So that'll be the focus of that. To answer your question about what will inform Park Row, we're hoping that the engagement consultant will also put together a set of recommendations out of the engagement that they undertake over the summer. So the engagement that will start next month and progress over the summer until the fall. We're hoping that they can kind of create a set of recommendations for capital improvements on Park Row.
Will you be using the really terrific plans that were done in 2009? There were plans that were done for Park Row. Is that going to enter into this at all in terms of your work?
The question was, are we going to be looking at the 2009 plans? That's definitely an inspiration for this project. So the Kimlau Square, Chatham Square proposal that's been shown is somewhat based off of that. It's a bit updated to more modern standards and some later thinking, because that plan is relatively old from what we've been doing in the city. We've progressed a lot as a city of what we're doing. In regards to Park Row, we are also using that as a starting point. And really, a lot of the conversations for Park Row is figuring out, like, do we phase it? Do we start somewhere small? Do we wait to do an entire project? All while operating kind of under the goals of the 2009 plan and a lot of the thinking that went into that plan. Because there was a lot of community process for that.
Okay, let's not ask 2 huge questions if we might. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, just to answer the piece on the RFPs, our plan right now is to release 2 RFPs. The first one for an engagement consultant that'll start up right away in May, and then a second one for a design team in the fall. We decided to kind of split it up like that just because we knew that engagement should begin as soon as the announcement kind of went out. We didn't want people to really feel like a bunch of funding was announced and then nothing's been happening with it. So we wanted to get a head start on that engagement since we know it'll take quite a while and it will be a long and extensive process. And then the design team will come on board in the fall, and we'll have an engagement consultant as well who will carry on that engagement. So it'll continue through the design process.
But just for the gateway?
For all 3 components of the full project.
Okay, I am going to, I'm going to let us have 15 more minutes, and then we'll just take a set on whether we want to do more. So for 15 minutes, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to just do from the middle of the room. I'm going to go left and right now. I'm going to name 2 people. So you'll be number 1, and you'll be number 2.
This is a comment, not a question. My name is Nick Stabile. I'm one of the co-founders of the Park Row Alliance. We proposed the Park Row plan, all the beautiful handouts that you have. We're excited about this opportunity to transform our space, and we know that this community, and especially our small businesses, have been hit very hard. We also know that $4 million is not enough money to do the truly transformative work that we need on Park Row. So we will renew our call to our federal, state, and city partners to put in more dollars for Park Row so that we can take a broader step. 2 additional comments. 1, I just want to lift up a 2022 HRNA economic impact study. There are over 19,000 pedestrians that cross the Brooklyn Bridge every day. Those pedestrians can drive over $400 million of economic output to Chinatown and area neighborhoods. Accessing those pedestrians is key. Lastly, with respect to the short-term SIP, I just want to focus on a couple of things. One, please do better lighting and signage so that folks can be delivered to Park Row from the Brooklyn Bridge. Solve your pinch point, and I think I have everybody's agreement in this room. No more fucking NYPD cars parked on the sidewalk. It needs to stop today. They have operational challenges, we have operational challenges. Just deal with it. Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Irving Lee. I'm a longtime resident of Chinatown. I am comforted to know that Park Row is being considered for reopening because that is the major variable that's creating the crisis. You see that left turn going into St. James is quite dangerous, even if you have the pedestrian walkway. But I believe that the closure of Park Row, the whole premise behind it, is fundamentally false. That essentially 9/11 was the basis for its closure, and the police department utilizing the closure of Park Row is fundamentally wrong. It's really undermining the business and economy of Chinatown. And we should challenge the notion that national security is necessary for its closure, because the whole premise behind it is fundamentally false. And I'll just stop from here, but I would just, if you have any questions about that, it's clear that we need to challenge that premise. And it's clear now there's no real justification for it. Thank you.
I also realize that if it's just a comment, it's not going to be heard on unless you're standing very close to this Do's and Haiti. So it's up to you who you want to hear you. I'm going to take the gentleman in the blue shirt, and then I'll take you.
I'm Albert Hom. I'm a longtime resident of Chinatown, and been here for a while. So I do remember when we actually had a 400-car parking garage that was servicing Chinatown, and that was taken away from us before 9/11.
That's right.
And we had no community input in that. Is there any plan? I know it may be outside of the scope of this project you're talking about, but it should be something that we need to address. I mean, I'm not saying build another 400-car parking garage somewhere else, but you know, we're hurting, and that's not helping us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very concerned about a proposal to build a gigantic triangle in front of Park Row. And this is going to be triple the size of the current space. Now, we don't need traffic studies to let us know that there's so much congestion at rush hour, and now even on Sundays on Worth Street. Worth Street used to be a secondary roadway when Park Row was open, and now it is a very clogged artery. When we narrow the roads in the proposed plans, both at Chatham Square and on Park Row, that's going to be a problem for the people who live around Chatham Square. So we don't want to make a problem. We need to fix a problem, and we have to be very careful about how we proceed. A real big concern is Park Row, they're suggesting that we eliminate one lane so that there's only one lane in each direction on Park Row. Now, if there's a bus coming up and down the street, you have all the cars piling up behind it. Plus, in front of the side of our building, we have lost, after 9/11, our ability to park moving trucks, cars that pick people up, all gone. The same occurred with Chatham Green. So we need to look carefully to make sure that we're not creating new problems when we're proposing new solutions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I think it's a great presentation. My name is John Ost. I live in Southbridge Towers, where I have served on the board of directors. And just as a point of information, after 2001, Southbridge combined with Chatham Green and Chatham Towers, and we filed a lawsuit against the police department because before then it was closed completely. It is now open only to buses, and it's supposedly open based on a lawsuit to ambulances and fire trucks. So if you're in Chatham Green or you're in Chatham Towers, the ambulances and fire trucks are not using it because they lose too much time trying to get through the checkpoint to save you. And activity has increased at the downtown hospital, so they're doing a lot more now. There's a lot more traffic for ambulances. So I would hope that the DOT would look into that in making sure that there's no restriction on ambulances and fire department trucks going through Park Row when they're finished. Thank you.
So please go ahead and back.
Thanks. I'll keep this quick. Please do not reopen Park Row to private vehicles. It's completely incompatible with this great plan that the Park Row Alliance has put out. The vitality of the neighborhood depends on the pedestrians, like Nick said, not on cars. So please, please, don't reopen it to cars.
I'll go ahead and take you, and then back, 1 and then 2.
Yeah, I've got a question. Could you talk a little bit more about the environmental assessment that's coming after the SIP? What are you looking at? Why are you doing an environmental assessment?
In regards to the in-house project, we're not doing a full environmental assessment because we're using our temporary materials and we're really improving what's already there. We're not making drastic changes to Park Row. From an operational standpoint, that would trigger any need for an environmental assessment. And then for the larger traffic study, while not a full environmental assessment, it is a very rigorous traffic study as required by city law to meet the goals of the capital project and ensure limited to no impacts on operations for the Chatham Square project.
But there was an environmental assessment mentioned after the SIP, I believe, in the timeline. I don't know if it's DOT or another agency.
Oh, that's included in the traffic study. So it's on EIS. It's a formal traffic study that DOT is required to do for capital projects that change operations, but it's not a full environmental impact.
So that's part of the larger redesign?
Yes, it's part of the larger design.
Thanks.
Okay, if you'd like to speak now in the back, yep, you.
Hi. We have a park across the way at the intersection of St. James and Madison. It's called Triangle Park or James Madison Park. It's been neglected for many years, okay? It's overrun with wild bushes that have not been taken care of. Okay, we have garbage that overflow from the garbage can onto the floor. Okay, and what I'm really upset about is that it attracts rats. We're already overrun with rats in the neighborhood, all right? It's dark now because Rite Aid is closed, and so I go there, I have to pass through there when I go shopping across the way at the supermarket. So every time I'm walking through, I have to look all around, you know, very apprehensively whether I'm gonna be, you know, meeting up with a rat, okay? So, you know, it's really sad because, you know, it started out as a very beautiful park, but now hardly anyone sits there on the benches, and it's like going to waste. The Parks Department has to do an upkeep, a continuous upkeep of the park. Either they get rid of all those bushes that they cannot trim, okay? They have to send people in regularly, not just on a one-term basis, to pick up all the garbage, okay, so that people can use it. I go through, and it's nice to go through it, hoping that there'll be people there, so you feel safe about going through instead of going through an empty park. The Parks Department has to do something. We know we're short of money, okay, but this is getting really serious in terms of the rat problem, okay, and the waste, okay. It's like, it's a small park. It doesn't take a lot of effort to either trim the bushes or just get rid of the bushes and repave it with regular grass. Okay? It's a total waste.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we don't have a parks representative here with us today, but I will make sure to share your concern with them.
Yeah, the Parks Department has to keep up.
Okay, so I'm going to head over to this side, you do number 1, and then I'm going to take number 2.
Yeah, I have a question for the DOT. So if you guys close certain lanes in the Chatham Square intersection, what do you think is going to happen to traffic there? Do you think it'll make it worse or better?
So the question was, with the change in travel lanes at Kimlau Square or Chatham Square, do we expect traffic to get worse or better? At this point, we don't fully know. We've done like a very high-level conceptual traffic analysis, just using some old data, just to kind of gut check and make sure that we think it's not going to get terribly worse or change any drastically. But that's what the traffic study will evaluate. So we'll be conducting a rigorous traffic study to ensure safe operations for vehicles, safe operations for transit users and pedestrians, and also cyclists. And we'll be sharing all those results as we go through the traffic study with our community stakeholders as part of this project. So we will be adapting the design to match what comes out of the traffic study.
All right. So I'm going to go with you and then you. I got 1 and 2.
Hi, my name is Father Kwan. I'm the pastor of Transfiguration Church, and also we are in charge of St. James's School, which is on St. James's Place. My question is, according to the drawing, I saw that Bowery runs into St. James's Place. Is that the plan? Isn't Bowery 2 lanes on each side, but St. James is currently only 1 lane? And I noticed if you do the traffic study in the summer, we don't have summer school session there, but please take also into consideration all the children and the parents who are loading and unloading their children at the school on the corner of St. James Place and James Street. Thank you.
So the question was about lane reductions on Bowery into St. James, and then also for consideration for schools. So we will be accommodating turns from Bowery onto other streets, so we will just have 1 through lane into St. James as currently shown, to be confirmed during the traffic study. And the traffic study will be conducted, and the counts will be collected during our approved traffic study season, that's what we call it, which is usually conducted when schools in session. So we'll be picking dates when schools in session to make sure we're adequately studying all the factors.
Yeah, I just had a question about the working groups, and I noticed that MoCA's not on the list. Is there a reason why?
So the working group was really a combination of stakeholders that reported out to sort of a larger stakeholder group. So for example, Chamber of Commerce, community boards, just kind of larger representation. There's certainly a cultural organization on there. I think Chinatown is represented. The list is not exclusive in terms of like, we consult with MoCA, we have a good working relationship with MoCA, and certainly when we talk about art and public art, like we will be reaching out to additional stakeholders, including MoCA. Great.
Can I see how many hands we have to go who really want to speak? And I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take those 4. Now I've demonstrated no ability to remember who had their hand up. So could you raise your hand again so I can try to memorize? Okay, thank you. And then we'll see. So I'm going to start in the very back. 1.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very thorough. I understand that there's a little bit of controversy about like the parking and reopening and all of that. I personally think that having private cars being able to come up and down and having that street parking back would be really nice since we don't have that garage anymore. But in talks so far with NYPD, I know that it sounds like we're more at the stage of whether to open Park Row or not. But has there been talks of parking at all up to this point? And second question is on the testimony that's on the flyer that we could kind of request more money, where should we be directing those to?
Good questions. 2 questions. The first one was in regards to reopening Park Row and any conversations with NYPD about reinstituting parking. To my knowledge, none of those conversations have happened, but they could be a part of this process as we go through the larger community outreach process and the traffic study. So I think that's kind of the only answer we have this time for that question. In regards to funding, I think really there's not an immediate need now. I think we really need to work through implementing the SIP, working with the community to develop a scope, to really know what we're asking for. We don't want to kind of make an ask for money and then either not ask for enough and go ask again, or ask for too much. Sometimes too much money is too much good thing. So we just want to really have a clear scope and cost estimate before we go and seek additional funding from federal and state and
So I think your question was in relation to the flyer. So Nick, who's walking towards you right now, is one of the founding members of the Park Row Alliance, and it is an initiative that they're undertaking, which is separate and apart from the city's project, but they are a member on the working group. So feel free to speak to Nick, or Nancy's on as well. And they represent Chatham Green and Chatham Square, Chatham Green and Chatham Towers on the working group.
Go to the QR code.
Okay, you have.
Yeah, hi. New York City is comprised of multiple Chinatowns, thriving Chinatowns. I'm starting to say our Chinatown is not one of them. It has been stagnant for the last 15 years, and there's a lot of different reasons, but two of the most main reasons was the loss of the parking spot and the closure of Park Row. Okay, just want to make that comment. To reopen Park Row, do a big step in helping the businesses of Chinatown. I just want to ask a question. The Veterans Arch in Kimlau Square, is that a fixed location that cannot be changed? And two, is the plaza a fixed thing, or is there, when the DOT made their presentations last summer, there was a couple of different options. One was a circle, or a traffic circle. Is that still in play?
So let me address the Memorial Arch, and then I'll hand it over to Casey. So the American Legion is represented in the working group. The arch currently is absorbing substantial damage. I think many of you see that there are braces on it. It is monitored monthly, and the cracks are getting significantly worse. So Parks is engaging in a separate process. There has been money set aside to repair the Memorial Arch, and there's an RFP currently out to find someone to do that work. So the repair work is proceeding as planned. The Memorial Arch is landmarked. So in order to move it, we would have to make an extremely substantial and compelling case. The American Legion has expressed a strong desire to keep it where it is. And I should also add that it's not just the arch, the benches are also part of the landmarking. So if at all possible, the arch will stay where it is. That being said, because the square will be getting larger, and there will possibly be discussions of adding another piece of public art within that space, there will be larger conversations around the statue that is there as well. The Fujianese community were the ones that commissioned that statue. They are also represented on the working group. They have expressed a willingness to move the statue if it helps this overall process. And so that is my very long way of saying that all of this is fluid and will be part of the conversation. And then the last part I will add is any public art that is on city land must also go through a public design commission process. So it is not a decision that EDC or DOT can make on their own. There's a completely independent, separate group of commissioners that really are the experts on public art in public spaces. And if we were to have to go through that process, they also have public hearings where the public is able to give input in support or against.
So I'm just a question. The plaza all the way up to the arch, is that when I look at it, it's quite far out into the intersection. That's the only option?
So the question was, is the design of the plaza relatively set, and does it extend from the building line out to the arch? At this time, that's the proposal we're moving forward with to study. It really met the most goals that we came up with, and met the goals of what we heard from the community outreach. So it expands the public space. That was something that was outlined. It simplifies traffic operations, which was a big community concern, a big DOT concern. We're very concerned about traffic operations and how intersections function. And then also really just simplifies the general intersection as a whole. So that's why we're moving forward with this proposal. That's not to say that there might not be some changes to it as we go through the design process, but from a high level, that's the proposal that's moving forward.
It seems like a lot of comments, it constricts traffic quite a bit.
Go ahead.
Hi, I do want to thank the members of the CB3 board. I know it's your volunteer time and we really do appreciate it as shown by all the people who are here. My question is actually directed at the use of funds. I'm hearing from the board that there's limited funds, obviously, to do all the different things that we want to do for this area of Park Row, Kimlau Square, etc. For the sidewalk repairs for Nancy's project, which does have some very beautiful graphics, it's $4 million. It's not enough money. Has there been any thought given to taking the $2.6 million for the Gateway project to help fund the expansion of the pedestrian walkway? Because I don't know about you all, but $2.6 million for a gateway arch is crazy. Who's agreeing with me? Yeah, I mean, that's insane. $2.6 million. And by the way, in this same discussion that we're having, you know, I'm hearing this woman talking about how the American Legion's arch is falling down. The parks are not being upkept. So the use of this money to create yet another gateway arch that there will be no funding to do maintenance on makes no sense to me. So has there been any thought given to using that $2.6 million in a smarter way?
So first, to be clear, the community board has absolutely no influence
No,
on
and I
that.
understand that.
You're
I'm
saying
asking
the board.
them.
There
Yeah.
you go. Put that up to the agencies.
Thank you, David. So the distribution of the state funds are a decision that was made by the Department of State and the governor. So those, and there was a year-long engagement process where many projects were considered, many people applied, and at the end, 11 projects were chosen, 3 of which you see, you know, here today. I will say part of the reason the city stepped in and felt like it was necessary to add over $40 million to it was because of exactly what you just said, which is that while the $3 million, $4 million, $2.5 million was a great start, it was clearly not enough, and we felt like in many ways it overpromised what it could deliver. The Gateway project, the sponsors of the project and those who supported it made a commitment to conduct a private fundraising effort if needed, and that is part of the process moving forward. If after the design brief and bringing on the artist, there is a decision to pursue something that would exceed the cost of $2.5 million, there is a commitment to private fundraising.
A little more. Yeah.
I just want to salute you for working with so many stakeholders. It's not easy. My question is very simple, is are there any deadlines as to when the money has to be expended? As you know, you stick around long enough, you'll lose the money. Maybe that's not.
Thank you. That's clearly you've been around city projects for a long time. So yes, the state. Look, this is a very aggressive timeline. The 5 years is extremely aggressive. We have to say that over and over again, especially for a project that has this many stakeholders and this many agencies trying to work together. The state has expressed, the state and city leadership has expressed a preference for us to start drawing down the capital money within 2 years and then to finish within 5. And so that is everyone's goal here, is to really meet those milestones and benchmarks. We work very closely with the state on this, and so my understanding is that it is not a situation where at a certain date there's a cutoff and then the money gets moved somewhere else. We have to show substantial progress is what is written in the contract, and so that is what we aim for.
But when you say 2 years, we got the money a year ago.
That is correct, and so we are thinking that with a 16 to 18 month engagement and with a planner on, and being able to conclude that engagement process, that will be considered substantial progress.
Okay, one last thing I want to mention. I think that the memorial on Kimlau Square is on a little bitty chunk of state park land. And I think they require legislation to remove it. That was my understanding 15 years ago. It's city parkland. Okay.
Just the actual, yeah, we put it.
Great. Okay, so I think that'll wrap up the presentation tonight. As for when this comes back to community board, well, I don't know when that is. There'll be meetings of the working group are going to happen in the meantime, so I just heard May. In May, this will probably come back to the community board. A lot of what people are talking about tonight is like, I want this piece, or I don't want that piece. Like, that's going to be hammered out over the next, I'm just going to spitball, 6 months. You know, and then at some point between 6 and 9, 10 months from now, there's going to be things like conceptual designs coming through, and then final designs, and you know, then it'll get work. So this is quite early for when community boards usually see this kind of thing, is what I'm trying to say. We usually don't see it until it's a conceptual design. All right? Yeah.
I just want to add that our next public presentation will be at Community Boards 1's Executive Committee next Thursday evening. It will be a very, very similar presentation. We might tweak it a little bit to focus on the Park Row impacts on the Community Board 1 side, but it is the next public opportunity for you to comment.
Yeah.
I mentioned that this will be the presentation here.
Oh, the presentation will be online as well as the recording. So both the recording, Susan, and the PowerPoint and whatever it was.
What?
Both the PowerPoint and
Well, the video of the whole meeting.
the video will be online. Okay. And we have one more item of business, but I'm going to let the room clear out. So we'll be taking about a 3-minute pause.